Hi everyone, Dragon here. Thought I might make this video here to talk to you a little bit about mounting and using GoPro cameras or cameras similar to GoPros in a game of paintball. Obviously I've been making footage now for about a year or so, and I thought I might make this video to put down all of my learned information about what to do and what to expect when using cameras. Now, first off, the thing you'll want to do is you'll want to select what type of camera you want to use. Obviously, GoPros like this are extremely popular in a game of paintball. These are sort of the first ever action cameras to come to market. That being said, however, you don't have to go with a GoPro. There are lots of other cameras out there you can use. A very popular one you'll see is the Contour HD, which is like a barrel sort of camera which people usually mount on the side of their goggles. The other sorts of cameras you can get, however, are sort of imitation GoPros. I started off using these. This is an SJ-Cam SJ4000, shoots 1080p HD footage with a 170 degree field of view lens on there and at 30 frames per second. So these are pretty good entry-level cameras. That's about £50. The camera that I'm going to be using is my GoPro Hero Plus. This was about £150. Key difference between this and the SJ-Cam. Obviously, this has the camera case built into it. It's actually part of the body of the camera. The higher end GoPros tend to go for a style similar to the SJ-Cam, whereby you've got the case as external, but the Hero Plus has it part of the body. It makes it slightly thinner, as you can see there. Not only that, the Hero Plus shoots at 60 frames per second, so you get much smoother, faster footage. So once you've selected your camera that you want, next thing you want to do is you'll want to find out how you can mount it. Now, a common mount that people like to use is the handlebar mount. That's this sort of style mount here. The reason that people like this is it's cheap and it's simple, and with the clamping handlebar style on it, it means that a lot of people will try and use this to mount their camera to their gun barrel. I wouldn't recommend that as your primary camera mount though. The reason being is that what you don't realise is that 90% of the time when you're running around with a camera mounted to your gun barrel, you're going to be recording the floor. A lot of people don't appreciate the fact that 90% of the time their gun is actually pointed at the ground unless they're actually shooting at someone, so you end up having to sift through a lot of very boring footage trying to find the decent points when you're actually shooting at someone, not to mention the fact that the camera doesn't see what you see until you're actually aiming at someone. However, the handlebar mount here can be extremely useful in mounting a camera to your goggles. The reason for this is very simple. Obviously you've got your goggle like this here, and one of the things you're going to want to consider is where on earth are you actually going to mount the camera on it. Now, a lot of people will simply mount their camera on the top of the goggle here. A lot of the time, however, you'll see some people with their cameras mounted on the side here, off to one side, or on the other side. There are benefits and drawbacks to both of these different types of methods. I'm going to quickly walk you through them. First off, if you have the camera mounted at the top here, the camera is seeing exactly what you see. Therefore, of course, it's when you're playing back the footage later on, it's the most accurate representation of the game that you are playing. The drawback with this style of camera mount, though, is it tends to create quite a tall profile, not to mention the fact that if you're using a speedball gun with a hopper on it, the hopper tends to obscure your field of view. A lot of the time, a lot of people don't appreciate the fact that their hopper is directly in line with the camera here, so of course, whenever you're actually shooting at someone, you can't see. There's a way of getting around that. I'll talk you through that in a moment. The other method, of course, is mounting the camera on the side here. This overcomes the problem of the hopper getting in the way of the camera, but it also does increase, it causes another problem, and that is if you're leaning out of a piece of cover off to one side, so if you're leaning out to the right and you've got your camera mounted on your left, the camera's going to be recording the wall. It doesn't see what you see. Likewise, if you've got the camera mounted on the right hand side and you're leaning out the left hand side of a piece of cover, again the camera's going to be recording the wall. My favourite style of mount is to mount the camera in line with your eyesight here. The way you get around the problem with the hopper getting in the way of the camera is you need to discipline your shooting. What you need to do is when you're shooting, you don't shoot with the gun directly upright. What you do is you rotate your gun to the side slightly. That way you can see across the lane of the barrel of the gun, not to mention the fact the hopper isn't in the way of the camera. So that's the way that I would recommend. That being said, let's go ahead and let's see about starting to mount this camera. Now, like I said, we're going to be using the handlebar mount for this, so what we need to do is first off we need to modify this handlebar mount so we can actually use it. Now, obviously with us mounting it on top of the goggle, we're not going to be able to use the stalks here, because if we do, these stalks are going to get in the way of the lens. So what we need to do is we need to dismantle this and remove the lower half. rid of those, get rid of the rubber piece. Also, we're going to want to get rid of this nodule in the side here. That's not going to be particularly useful for us, this stud here, but you're going to want to keep hold of that for later though. What we're going to use instead to mount this is we're going to use some simple machine screws. These are M5x20 screws. We're going to need 3 of these. So, the way that we're going to go about mounting this is obviously we're going to be taking this handlebar, the top half of the handlebar mount, and we're going to be fitting it into the top of our goggle here. Quickly before I go ahead and mount this, I wanted to quickly talk to you about the types of goggle that are good for mounting cameras. These are my Proto ES thermals, or Proto EL thermals I think they're called. These are actually not standard. As you can see, I've modified these. These were actually my university project. But the good thing about this sort of style of goggle is that the mounting point at the top here in this area here is made of plastic. This is excellent because what it means is that this is a nice, very firm platform for you to actually mount your camera to. If you've got something that's made out of injection molded rubber, when you're running around, you've got your camera mounted on the top here, it's going to be rocking back and forth a lot. So having a set of goggles that's got this plastic top is very, very good because it provides a nice steady platform for you to mount to. So first things first, let's go ahead and let's actually go ahead and get this handlebar mount attached. Now obviously, first things first, we're going to need to put some holes in the top there. You saw there earlier that I'd actually already put holes in. Not sure if the camera can see that, but I've basically clipped out some of the vents here using a pair of wire cutters. Obviously, if you are using a goggle that uses an injection molded rubber rather than plastic as the top part of the mount here, you can use a soldering iron to burn the holes through. Obviously, if you can do that though, make sure you remove the lenses first. So now that we've got the lens out and we've got the frame out, we can go ahead and we can mount these. We take our M5x20 screws, fit them underneath, place the handle mount over the top, and we start screwing it in. Obviously the reason we're not using those long studs that I mentioned earlier is because if we were to use those, they would actually be encroaching into your field of view underneath the lens here, which you don't want. With these screws, obviously you want them reasonably tight because you want it not to rock back and forth too much, but at the same time you don't want it too tight because you could end up damaging the plastic slightly. So just going to nip those up a little bit. There we go. Right, let's reassemble the lens. Okay, there we go. So now we have our handlebar mount on the top here, we can actually go ahead and we can attach our GoPro. Now obviously again, for the actually mounting it, we're going to be removing that stud there again on the side here. We don't want that one in the side, we're going to be using another M5x20 screw. So we go ahead, we slot the camera in, and just basically push the screw through and then tighten it up. Again, you want this to be reasonably tight but not too much, otherwise you could end up potentially damaging the mount point again. Alright, and there we have it. That is the camera now mounted to the goggle. We can now start using this to record footage in game. Now, that is a good start, but we can definitely do better than this sort of style of mount. This mount suffers with a few inherent problems. First off, as you can see if I rotate it to the side there, you can see that is actually quite a tall and high profile mount. Obviously this means you're going to get shot in the camera much more often. Of course, getting shot in the camera does count as a kill. I don't care what anyone says, you shoot him in the camera, it's part of you, you are dead. Obviously this of course means, like I said, you're going to get shot a lot more. Not only that, it's a very high centre of gravity mount. This of course means that as you're running around, your camera is going to be rocking back and forth quite a bit. Obviously with the rubber style mounts it's going to be happening even more. This will mean you get very shaky camera footage, and not only that, it also means that as you're running back and forth you'll hear this camera clacking back and forth. This of course upsets your audio. The other problem with this is that because the camera is rocking back and forth, what will happen over time is the mount point down here and the flange tabs on the actual camera will start to break apart. Obviously there's a lot of stress going through that mount point there. As it rocks back and forth it starts to put a lot of force through those mounts, and as a result of that you'll start to see cracks appear. I'll actually show this to you quickly. I've got an old mount here that I can point this out on. This was one of my old style mounts that I use on my i3, and I'm not sure if the camera can see there, but there's actually a piece there that's actually almost broken off. I can actually show you here if I just, there we go, broken. Over time this will happen to the mount. Now obviously this isn't a huge issue, well it's annoying, but it's not a huge issue. The reason being is of course that these are fairly cheap replaceable components. These are only a couple of pounds. You can buy them as replacement parts online. Obviously the same is also true with the actual camera as well. What you'll find is the tabs here that actually mount the camera to the actual goggle, over time you'll start to see cracks appearing in those and they will start to break apart. Now obviously with the SJ cam here that's not a huge issue because the camera actually comes out of the case, and of course these cases, again, these are only about £10, you can replace them. The GoPro Hero 3, the Hero 4 and all the high-end GoPro systems also use this same sort of style of mount. It does however become a serious problem with some of the Hero and Hero Plus cameras though. The reason being is the actual camera mount is built into the camera's body. This of course means that if these flange tabs break, then that's it. You can't replace it and you can no longer mount your camera using this sort of system. I think in about sort of the year or so that I've been recording footage with my GoPros, I've probably gone through about 2 cases because of the flange tabs breaking. So we need to come up with a way and method of stopping those tabs on the camera that are breaking. I'm going to walk you through a style of mount that I like and that does hopefully overcome this issue. These here are my i3 goggles. Obviously, like I said earlier about the injection molded rubber mounting system, this is a goggle that does use that injection molded rubber, and as a result of that the mount isn't as secure. What I've done in order to overcome this is I've fitted underneath the handlebar mount here, I've fitted a couple of washers on the underside here, which helps to make that much more sturdy. You'll also notice the handlebar mount I've got here is a curved one. It curves forward slightly. That's very useful because of the mount I'm about to start to put together. Now, this mount that I'm going to put together is what I like to refer to as a knuckle style mount. You're going to see why in a moment. I'm going to be using these elbow extension pieces. You can pick these up from Amazon, they're fairly cheap. If you buy the SJ cam, it actually comes with a few of these because the SJ cams come with pretty much all the different style mounts that you could ever want. I'm going to need 2 of these for this particular mount. I'm going to show you how to put them together. So obviously again we're going to be using our M5x20 screws, not the studs that they normally come with. We will actually use one of the studs, but for the most part we're going to be using the M5x20 screws. So let's take that out. Take the first elbow connector, fit it in, and nip that up. Then we take the next elbow connector. We're going to use an M5x20 screw on this one. There we go. And again, nip that up. Alright. Finally, what we're going to do is we're now going to actually mount the camera. You can see there why I call it a knuckle style mount, because it resembles the knuckles of your finger, so not particularly original, but never mind. So what we're going to do now is we're now going to mount our camera. So again, we take another M5x20 screw, fit the camera in upside down, put the screw through, and tighten that up. There we go. Right, once you've got your camera position, make sure you nip up the screws on the knuckle mount. Make sure that they're not going to rotate or twist. Make sure that's nice and secure. Now, I know what a lot of people are probably thinking right now. That camera is in your field of view. It's going to block your line of sight. Believe me, it doesn't. When you're wearing this sort of style of mount, you're aware of the camera in your peripheral view. It's you can see it up there, but believe me, it doesn't block your line of sight one bit. This mount is also much better in terms of compared to the other one. The reason being, as you can see, it is a much lower profile mount and is much less likely to get shot because it's not sticking up nice and high. Secondly, because it has a lower centre of gravity, it's not going to rock back and forth nearly as much when you're running and sprinting, and as a result of that, it's going to put less force through the joints here. They're going to last much longer. The other really great thing about this style of mount is that if any paintballs hit the camera, what it means is because the camera is now pushed up against the frame of the lens of the goggle, any force that goes through the camera body gets translated into the body of the goggle, and as a result of that, the force is much more easily distributed. Of course, the camera case is going to last a lot longer. That being said, this mount isn't without a few problems. Obviously, because of course it's now in front of the goggle, as you're sprinting and running around, what you'll find is that the camera will still rock back and forth a little bit, and because it is mounted to the frame of the goggle, you'll get that clack, clack, clack noise as you're running around, which can really upset your audio. Easiest way to overcome this is to simply put a small strip of foam on the back of the camera there so it cushions that blow. I'm going to quickly show you how to do this, and you'll see now why I put this stud here in rather than the screws, because it makes removing and remounting the camera much easier. So what you want to do on your Hero, on your GoPro rather, GoPro Hero, is you want to put a small strip of foam across there where it actually makes contact with the goggle. So we're going to do that now quickly. Bear in mind, of course, the camera is upside down. It's going to be down at this point here. So if you put that there, and that strip of foam there will help to cushion the blow of the camera pushing against the goggle. There we go. That is the camera now all sorted and mounted. Much lower profile, much stronger, going to last a lot longer, and you're much less likely to get shot in it. Once you've got the camera mounted, however, that is not the only thing. What I'm going to go through now is a few tips and tricks that I've learnt over the years as to good use and running of your camera when you're out on the field. First bit of advice, if you're going to be using GoPro cameras on the field, always carry a microfiber cloth. It is extremely frustrating if you get shot in the camera lens and you find that your footage that you thought that you were recording, which looks amazing, you've got loads of illuminations, you've captured a load of objectives, or some just really cool stuff, and when you go to play it back later you can't see anything because they just smear all over the lens. So if you're going to use GoPro cameras or any form of action camera, make sure you carry a microfiber cloth. You're going to need to clean it from time to time. Sounds obvious, but believe me, the amount of times that you forget to clean your camera lens in the middle of a game, especially long drawn out games, you're going to want to make a point of periodically checking your camera lens to make sure it's not covered in spatter or any sort of any paint whatsoever. So always carry microfiber. This is good sort of advice anyway, because you're going to want to clean the lens of your goggle anyway from time to time, but always carry one of these. Next piece of advice is camera batteries and memory cards. Sounds simple, but believe me, a lot of people overlook it. An action camera, like a GoPro, a fully charged battery in it will last about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours if you're lucky. With a lot of cameras, of course, you can get replaceable batteries. The SJ cams, you can swap the batteries out. The GoPro Hero 3, 4, or the higher end ones, you can swap the batteries out. The Hero and the Hero Plus you can't, it's part of the camera body. So one of the things that I would always recommend that you get is one of these here. This is essentially it's just a power brick. It is a smart lithium ion cell which uses USB connection points to charge up any sort of electrical device. You can charge anything from a tablet, your mobile phone, or in this case, an action camera, which is exactly what you want. You simply take the USB cable, plug it in, then, and remember of course I put this mount in here rather than M5x20 screws, so it makes it easier to take your camera on and off, because of course at the moment we can't get to the charging point on the camera because the charging point on the camera is behind this piece here. So what you want to make a point of is after each game, when you go back to the safe zone, take your camera off straight away, bring it in, take it off, put it on charge there. The GoPro camera batteries are about 1.2 amps. This power brick that I've got here is a RAV power brick. This is 16.75 amps, so that's more than enough battery power to fully recharge your GoPro camera 12 times. So you need to make a point of, when you go back to the safe zone, straight away, first thing you do before you fill up again, before you rearm, take your camera off, put it on charge, because if you can't change the batteries out on it, you're going to need to be able to snatch whatever recharge time you can get. These are really useful because of course whenever you go out on site to a paintball venue, the chances of you having a power supply or a power socket available are very, very slim, so always make sure you've got one of these power bricks. These are really, really useful. Now, the next piece of advice I'm going to give you is with regards to the audio on your camera. These cameras are great for recording really, really good video. The image quality and clarity is excellent. The problem is though, they're encased inside of this hardened plastic case, which is good because it means the camera is nice and protected, but it means that the audio transmission is absolutely terrible. Now, there are a couple of easy ways to overcome this. Professional video makers, what they do is they use the camera to record their video, and they have hidden about their person somewhere an external microphone. That way the microphone captures the audio, the camera captures the video, and then using simple video editing software later on they overlay the two so that you can of course get really, really perfect video and really, really clear audio. For people like me and for the most of us who use cameras, we're not really going to go to that level of depth to try and capture the best possible audio. An easy way to overcome the problem of poor audio quality is to simply modify your camera case. Now, on all these action camera cases that you've got, they've got this rubber seal on the back here. The rubber seal is of course to make it watertight. In a game of paintball, you're not going to be diving, you're not going to be going underwater. The worst you're going to get is be playing in the rain. So what we can do is we can simply take that rubber seal and remove it from the camera's body altogether. Obviously, don't throw it away, keep hold of it, you may need it later on. You would not believe the amount of difference that makes to the quality of the audio on your camera. That makes it much, much better. There's a huge difference. Another thing you can do, and this is what I did with my SJ cams, is actually if you look on the SJ cams, what you'll notice on some of them is you can actually see where the microphones are. You can see the sort of dots on them. I'm not sure if the camera can see that, but there are a couple of perforated holes on the side here where the microphone is. There's also some more along the bottom here. So what I've done with the camera case is I've simply drilled some holes where the microphone ports are. There and along the bottom there I've drilled a couple of holes so the audio transmission is much improved. This does have some drawbacks though. If any of you watched any of the videos I took from Hurt Locker from 2015, you may have noticed it was quite a windy day and the wind was playing hell with my audio. With these holes drilled in the side, obviously the audio is much clearer, but if there's any wind it rushes over the hole and you get horrible wind interference, so be aware of that. If you do that to your camera, it is going to suffer a bit more on windy days. Now, the next piece of advice I'm going to give to you is how to ensure that your camera doesn't give away your position. What I'm talking about here is the camera on it has got points on it. Actually, if I show you on the Hero Plus, the camera has actually got points on it where there are lights on it. So there are two lights on the front here, there's also lights on the back. The problem with this, of course, is if you're inside of a building, or if it's particularly dark, if you're playing a night game or something, these blinking red lights on here will give away your position very, very easily. I watched a great video by the Hidden Hedgehog where he was playing at Anzio Camp inside one of the buildings, and he went into a darkened room. It was pitch black, but he saw in the corner a blinking red light from another player, and he went up to him, barrel tagged him. Really good footage, but again, that player's position was given away by the fact that his lights were on. A lot of cameras have settings where you can switch those lights off. The other thing you can do, of course, is if you don't have camera settings like that, just take a bit of electrical tape and just cover up those lights there. That way they won't give away your position. Obviously, with the lights covered up, it's a bit more difficult to tell whether or not your camera is actually recording, and this brings me on to another point. The buttons on here are, of course, designed to be robust. They're designed to maintain their water integrity to make sure the camera doesn't get waterlogged. The problem with them is they're not particularly sensitive, and of course if the camera's mounted on your head and you go into a game, you reach up to the top of the camera, you switch it on, you think your camera's recording, but of course you can't see it and you're not sure whether or not it is actually recording. Simplest way to overcome this: have a friend check to make sure your camera is actually recording. Make sure they check the LCD screen on the front here, or with the SJ cams, make sure they can see the back there and make sure the LCD screen has actually acknowledged the fact that it is recording. Again, it's very frustrating if you go into a game, think you're recording really great footage, only to find the camera wasn't running. Oh yes, something that I mentioned earlier, I said I was going to talk about batteries and memory cards, didn't talk about the memory card. With the memory cards in this camera, I use 32GB SD cards. I tend to find I go through one memory card per camera per day. That's shooting at 30 frames per second. Bear in mind with the higher end GoPros you can shoot at 60 frames per second. If you're using the 60 frames per second mode function, then you're going to go through your memory cards faster. So always make sure you have high capacity, good quality memory cards, and make sure you remember to swap them out. It's very, very easy to forget about that and to think you're recording footage when in actual fact the camera isn't because the memory card is full. Again, that's very frustrating. One final thing I'm going to talk about here, I'm going to quickly overlay a bit of footage from one of my games here to talk about camera lens exposure and light. It's a very important part of using a GoPro. Here's the footage.
As you can see here, I'm currently fighting inside of a building that has no internal light source. The only available light is coming in through the windows. Your camera will adjust its lens exposure based on the amount of light in its current environment. Notice how the windows appear blinding white until I move right up close to them. What this of course means for you is that when you're playing in game, if you're ever shooting out of a window, make sure you move close to it, otherwise your camera won't adjust itself and it'll always appear blinding white.
Well, there you have it guys, that's how I mount my camera, that's how I use my camera in game. Hope you've enjoyed this video, hope you've learned a little bit about how to go about mounting your camera. Feel free to leave a comment below. If any of you have got any tips or tricks that you use when it comes to recording footage in game using GoPro cameras, feel free to add that as well below, and hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time.